Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today, I continue bringing you the story of Hoai Ca and Hùng. In this episode, Tieu risks her life to save Tony, placing herself in grave danger. Please watch today's video to fully understand how the events unfold. Hoai Ca had been ill for several days. The small house, once filled with a warm and familiar rhythm of daily life, suddenly became quieter and noticeably emptier. Mornings that used to carry the sound of Hung's footsteps and soft conversations were now replaced by long stretches of silence. Hung had to work long shifts, leaving very early, before the sky had even begun to brighten. He prepared everything in silence, moving as gently as possible so as not to wake Hoai Ca. Before leaving, he could only lean close to the bed, offer a few familiar but worry-filled reminders, his eyes unable to hide the unease as he looked at his wife's pale, fever-stricken face. When the door closed, Hoai Ca was once again left alone with a house that now felt larger than usual and with the exhaustion that still clung to her. Tony stayed home with his mother. Though still very young, the boy had already learned to sense even the smallest changes in the family's atmosphere. He did not cry or run around noisily as he usually did. Instead, he played quietly nearby, occasionally looking up at his mother with eyes full of concern. Hoai Ca struggled to keep going, caring for her child while also trying to take care of herself, but the persistent fever that had lasted for days made everything far more difficult. Tasks that once seemed simple, cooking, tidying up, even just standing up or sitting down, now forced her to pause midway to catch her breath. The fatigue accumulated not only in her body but also weighed heavily on her spirit, leaving Hoai Ca feeling weaker and more helpless than ever. It was then that Tieu appeared. Upon hearing that her sister-in-law was unwell, she did not hesitate for even a second. The familiar road leading to Hoai Ca's house felt longer than usual to Tieu that day, her heart filled with worry. The moment she stepped inside, she immediately sensed something was wrong. The house was not exactly messy, but it lacked its usual order. The air felt heavy, so quiet that Hoai Ca's labored breathing could be heard clearly. Her sister-in-law's face was pale, her eyes sunken from many restless nights, and the sight made Tieu's heart ache. Without needing many questions, Tieu understood the situation at once. She did not offer long words of comfort, nor did she ask Hoai Ca to explain. Instead, she quietly set her bag down, rolled up her sleeves, and began helping. She prepared warm water and carefully placed it near the bed so Hoai Ca could sip slowly. She tidied the surrounding space, gathering unfinished items and reorganizing the house to make it neater and more airy. Every movement was efficient but unhurried, as though she had long been accustomed to caring for others. In the kitchen, Tieu prepared a simple meal. Nothing elaborate, nothing excessive, yet every detail was thoughtfully considered to suit someone who was ill. A gentle aroma spread through the house, bringing with it a rare sense of warmth amid the weary days. Tony sat nearby, quietly watching, his expression gradually relaxing as the tension in the house eased. Tieu's presence became a quiet support, giving both Hoai Ca and Tony a sense of reassurance. Watching Tieu handle everything so neatly and attentively, Hoai Ca felt both guilty and deeply touched. Guilty for making her sister-in-law shoulder the burden in her place, yet warmed by the knowledge that in her weakest moments, she was not alone. Tieu's small but sincere actions allowed Hoai Ca to clearly feel the bond between family members, a connection that needed no words, yet was present in every thoughtful gesture and every quiet act of care. As the atmosphere inside the house gradually settled and the earlier suffocating tension eased, Tieu gently suggested that Tony go outside to play for some fresh air. She didn't want the little boy lingering in a space still heavy with the scent of medicine and fatigue. Tony obeyed, hugging his familiar ball as he stepped into the yard, hesitant, yet trying to appear cheerful. He kicked the ball back and forth by himself, the soft, steady thud echoing faintly across the quiet yard. It was an ordinary moment, even carrying a rare sense of calm. None of them could have known that just minutes later, everything would change completely. After a few rolls, the ball suddenly veered off course. It picked up speed, slipped beyond the familiar boundary of the yard, and rolled straight out through the gate. Tony froze for a brief second, watching the ball slowly make its way toward the road. In his innocent mind, it was just a quick moment. Run out, pick it up, come right back. There was nothing to worry about. Without calling an adult or thinking further, Tony immediately ran after the ball, his small legs moving faster than usual. At that exact moment, a vehicle suddenly sped toward them from the bend at the end of the lane. The roar of the engine came too abruptly, shattering the quiet of the road that rarely saw much traffic. Tony stopped short in the middle of the road, his reflexes seemingly frozen by the sudden wave of fear. He couldn't comprehend what was happening, only that the sound was too loud, too close. Inside the kitchen, Tieu happened to glance outside while turning around. That single fleeting look was enough to send a chill through her entire body. The image of Tony standing alone in the middle of the road struck her like lightning. Without time to think, without fear for herself, she screamed instinctively, a sharp, panicked cry, and sprinted outside. In that split second, Tieu had only one thought. She had to pull Tony out of danger, no matter the cost. She lunged forward, using all her strength to shove Tony toward the safety of the roadside. His small body was flung aside, tumbling to the ground, but he escaped the danger by a hair's breadth. In that same instant, however, Tieu lost her balance. Her foot slipped on the road, and her body collapsed forward, falling directly in front of the oncoming vehicle. Time seemed to slow into a suffocating pause. The screech of brakes rang out, sharp and piercing, ripping through the quiet of the small neighborhood and leaving everyone stunned. Neighbors who heard the loud noise rushed outside. Some panicked and called for an ambulance, their voices trembling with fear. Others hurried over to lift Tony, who sat on the roadside sobbing uncontrollably, his entire body shaking, his small hands clutching tightly to the nearest adult as if searching for safety. Chaos erupted within seconds. Urgent shouts, hurried footsteps overlapping in confusion. Inside the house, Hoai Ca heard the scream and the sudden screech of brakes and rushed outside in terror, despite her still weak condition. The sight before her nearly made her collapse. Tieu lay motionless on the road, her hair soaked in blood, the spreading red sending Hoai Ca into shock. Trembling, she ran forward, dropped to her knees, and pulled Tieu tightly into her arms, calling her name in desperation, but there was no response. Hoai Ca's hands were smeared with blood, her breathing frantic, her mind completely blank. Fear, panic, and despair surged all at once, nearly overwhelming her, leaving her clinging to Tieu as if letting go would mean losing everything forever. The news of the accident reached Ly Hoai, Tieu's boyfriend, like a direct blow to his mind. When the voice on the other end of the line told him that Tieu had been seriously injured and was being rushed to the hospital, Hoai could barely react. All meetings, all unfinished plans were instantly left behind. He sprang to his feet and left work in a state of utter panic, his mind blank, with only one thought looping relentlessly. He had to get to her immediately. During the entire drive to the hospital, Hoai was barely aware of his surroundings. Time crawled forward with cruel slowness, each passing minute adding another layer of fear to his heart. He didn't dare imagine too much, yet the more he tried to push the thoughts away, the more vividly the worst possibilities appeared. Anxiety tightened around his chest, making even breathing difficult. At the hospital, Tieu was taken straight into the emergency room. The cold white lights, the sharp smell of disinfectant, and the hurried footsteps of doctors and nurses made the atmosphere suffocatingly tense. The medical team quickly stitched the wound on her forehead, where blood was still seeping, while immobilizing her arm, which had taken a heavy impact, to prevent further injury. Having suffered a severe shock from the fall, Tieu was placed under close observation, with her vital signs monitored continuously. The emergency room doors closed, separating her from the outside world and leaving her loved ones behind in helpless waiting. Outside in the hospital corridor, Hoai Ca collapsed onto a chair, her entire body drained of strength. Tears streamed down her face, soaking the hem of her clothes. In her mind, only one thought kept circling. If she hadn't been sick that day, if she had been stronger, if she had watched Tony more carefully, none of this would have happened. Guilt crushed her heart, making every breath feel heavy. She blamed herself for not being careful enough, for letting Tieu risk her life in such a dangerous moment. It was Hoai Ca who called Hùng. Her voice trembled and broke, each sentence choked by tears and panic. She couldn't even finish her words before bursting into sobs, managing only to say that Tieu had been injured while saving Tony. Upon hearing the news, Hùng didn't hesitate for a second. He immediately left work, despite how late it was, and rushed to the hospital through the night, his heart filled with worry and remorse. Along the way, he kept asking himself whether things would have been different if he had been home that day. The waiting outside the emergency room felt endless. Each time the door shifted slightly, all eyes snapped toward it in tense anticipation. No one spoke, yet the worry was etched clearly on every face. The echo of footsteps along the long corridor only made the waiting heavier. Finally, thanks to timely emergency treatment, Tieu began to pull through the critical phase. The doctors informed them that her condition had stabilized. She would need continued monitoring, but her life was no longer in danger. The news came like a gentle breeze, easing the oppressive tension in the air. Hoai Ca broke down in tears, this time from relief, from knowing that the worst had not happened. When Tieu regained consciousness, her eyes were still hazy, her body aching from the impact. But the first thing she did was not to check her own injuries, nor to ask about her condition. In a weak voice, she softly asked about Tony. That simple question made Hoai Ca choke, tears spilling over again. When she told Tieu that Tony was safe and hadn't been seriously hurt, Tieu smiled faintly, a fragile yet peaceful smile, as if her own pain no longer mattered. Tieu reached out with her uninjured hand and held Hoai Ca's, gently reassuring her. She told Hoai Ca not to blame herself, that everything had happened too fast and no one could have wished for it. The words were soft, but they were enough to make Hoai Ca sob openly. The guilt in her heart had not completely faded, but at least she knew that Tieu had never blamed her, never harbored resentment. In that fragile moment, amid the steady beeping of machines and the cold hospital lights, the bond between them grew even stronger, bound together by quiet sacrifice and a love that needed no words. The next morning, after all the necessary hospital procedures had been completed, the whole family brought Tieu home together. The early sky still carried the chill of the long night, while the young sunlight filtered gently through the roadside trees, soft yet fragile, much like the mood of those sitting in the car. No one spoke. After a long night of tension and panic, the silence was no longer frightening. It became a necessary pause for each person to quietly gather their emotions. Tieu leaned back against the seat, her body still exhausted, her face pale and not yet returned to its usual color. The white bandage on her forehead and her carefully immobilized arms stood as clear reminders of the ordeal they had just been through. Yet in her eyes there was no longer the panic or disorientation of those moments on the edge of danger, only a quiet calm, tinged with fatigue after crossing the fragile line between safety and loss. When the car stopped in front of the familiar house, a sense of home immediately settled over the space. The house was still there, simple and peaceful as always, but after one night, it seemed to carry an added meaning. The meaning of return, of still being able to reunite as a whole. Tony stood close beside Hoai Ca. The little boy was no longer running around or curious as usual. His eyes were red and swollen from crying too much, his gaze evasive and filled with fear. He didn't dare approach Tieu right away, only standing quietly behind his mother, occasionally glancing at her with eyes full of guilt and apprehension. Hoai Ca could clearly feel her son trembling. Tony's small hand clutched tightly at her clothes, as if letting go for even a moment might cause everything terrible to come crashing down again. Tieu had just sat down, not yet able to rest her back, when Tony suddenly burst into tears. His sobbing filled the quiet house, carrying all the fear, guilt, and confusion he had been holding in since the day before. He took small steps toward Tieu, each one hesitant, as if afraid of being rejected or scolded. His voice was tiny and broken by sobs as he repeatedly apologizing for running into the road, for getting Tieu hurt, for everything that had gone wrong. The apologies were clumsy and incomplete, but they came from the sincere remorse of a child who had, for the first time, truly felt the consequences of a moment's carelessness. Hearing Tony cry, no one in the house could remain unmoved, yet no one had the heart to blame him even a little. Tieu bent down and carefully pulled Tony into her arms, despite the pain in her injured arm and her body not yet fully recovered. Her embrace was not tight, but it was enough for Tony to feel protected and safe. She did not scold him, nor did she revisit the dangerous moment in a heavy tone. She simply stroked his back gently, letting him cry until the fear inside him slowly eased. When his sobs quieted, Tieu spoke softly but clearly, saying that roads are dangerous, that next time he must be more careful, and that what mattered most was that Tony was safe. Her words carried no reprimand or punishment, only reminders born of genuine love. That gentleness made Tony cling to her even more tightly, as if he had just been forgiven for the thing he feared most was beyond repair. After that incident, no one in the family blamed anyone else. There were no lingering what-ifs, no accusations or fault-finding. Instead, there was quiet gratitude, a shared sense of remorse that lived silently in each heart, and a bond that grew deeper after they had all faced a moment so close to loss together. Hoai Ca looked at Tieu, her heart filled with an emotion she could hardly name. She understood that she had not only been cared for when she was ill, but also protected through a silent, instinctive sacrifice, without hesitation, without calculation. The guilt in Hoai Ca's heart was still there, but it had gradually transformed into deep gratitude and a stronger resolve, to be more careful, to be stronger, so that no one in the family would have to endure such pain again. Hùng stood watching his younger sister, his eyes heavy with thought. After that shock, he treasured Tieu more than ever, not only because she was his sister, but because he recognized her maturity and courage, a courage willing to place others before herself. The image of Tieu rushing into the road to save Tony would stay with him for a long time, etched into his memory. Yet it was also that very image that helped him understand more clearly the value of family bonds, the value of things that seem ordinary, but are in fact incredibly fragile. Everyone realized that after that incident, their family had changed. Not through loud promises or emotional declarations, but quietly and steadily, becoming stronger. They loved one another more, cherished everyday moments more deeply, and learned to care for one another with greater understanding and responsibility. After that shock, their family had grown, more mature in the way they loved, in a silent, steady way that needed no words to be spoken.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Mình đang làm gì? Bây giờ thì mình vẫn đang làm video. Cảm ơn mọi người rất là nhiều. Tạm biệt mọi người nhé.